Every advance in technology does two things. It increases speed, but it increases complexity. But the other thing it does, and this is what I really believe that the people who run companies in India need to focus on, it places a premium on superior talent. Because what happens is technology is like this slingshot that allows David to bring down Goliath. But you got to have very good Davids and Daniels, or in this case, Ram and Sitas or whatever. You got to have very good ones. If you are really talented, technology can actually enhance the talent. So it's a famous Archimedes basically said, give me a place to stand and a lever long enough and I'll move the world. Okay, the lever long enough is going to be AI. The place to stand is what are you world class at. People development are taking care of your career. Bullshit. They work for the company. They don't work for you. They've never done so and they never will.
Hi, welcome to another episode of SellSide Conversations. Our guest today is Rishad Tobaccowala. Rishad is a media veteran with leadership roles at Publicis, Starcom, Liable, and Ed. Rishad was named by Time magazine as the top 5 marketing innovators of all time. He's a prolific speaker who talks about AI, change management, leadership, and the future of work. He's also an author, a podcaster, a writer, and many more things. In a conversation with Rishad, we'll talk about media, his views on the changing media landscape, his views on future of work and how people need to adapt themselves. So Rishad, welcome to SellSide Conversations. It's a pleasure having you here.
Thank you, Gautam.
So Rishad, let's start off with you've spent a large part of your career in media at agencies like Starcom, Publicis, and you've also had experience and vantage point of seeing technology shifts all over the world. So we'll cover two or three areas. One is media. We'll cover second is the role of AI, and we'll also cover work and culture and transformation. These are three broad topics that we'll cover. So let's start off with the media part. Now that generative AI is sort of embedded into our lives, how will the media landscape change, particularly with the media planning buying process? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so the media buying and planning process has always, over the last 3 or 4 decades, become much more technologically driven. Um, it has gone from buying media utilizing spreadsheets to utilizing algorithms and programmatic buys. And everything that is the automated part of media will further be enhanced by AI. The big difference this time is until now, the media business has primarily been a business of finding the right person at the right place at the right time. We have, however, distributed to them usually the very same message
Hmm.
because development of personalized messaging, especially image and videos, has been very, very expensive. So that has tended not to be as personalized. There's been, a little bit of personalization based on things like weather and name and color, but not much more. The biggest thing with generative AI is it's going to basically make the poetry of the business as important as the plumbing of the business. So the
Okay,
poetry of the
interesting.
business is the actual message or the interaction. And until now, the media business has been hobbled because finding the right place, person at the right time, and you know, and then but not exposing them to the exact message has been very limiting. Now that's the biggest shift. The biggest shift isn't really actually about the automation of the media buying. It is about the personalization at scale of image and video across the media buy.
So can you give us a sense of this personalization of scale? So let's say, example, an IPL is very popular in India. Maybe 100 million people watch it. Will 100 million people get unique messaging at the same time from the same advertiser?
Not necessarily 100 million, but today, let's say the 100 million get maybe 4 messages or 3 messages. 100 million will be overkill for 100 million people, but maybe 100 messages for 100 million people may not be overkill. So,
Okay.
but the idea of basically developing 100 different video commercials, right, today would be considered to be daunting. I mean, with real
Absolutely.
variations besides something at the end saying your name or something like the special offer. But to have 100 different videos would be daunting. Today, that can increasingly be done or will be done at scale. So, it's always dependent when we are talking what the state of the art is. But in video creation, I would say right now, about to be state of the art is going to be something from Google Gemini called VO, VEOH. Prior to that, it's been Sora. Um,
Okay. Yeah.
and so what happens is for people who want to think about it, they should play around with it. That's number one. Number two is there is going to be variation. So I think the biggest implications to the business will actually be on the messaging side. Everybody's focused on the buying side. Yes, there will be implications there. The implications on the buying side will be much faster and easier to do competitive analysis and media buying than ever before. So yesterday, there's a gentleman who writes an amazing Substack called One Useful Thing. His name is Ethan Mollick. And Ethan
Okay.
Mollick yesterday wrote about a model, the latest model from OpenAI. And they have a terrible, naming convention, but this is like O3, okay, is the
Okay.
best I can tell. And he basically gave it an instruction, and the instruction was, I'm trying to start a cheese store,
Okay.
okay? Could you please give me a competitive analysis of cheese stores in my area? Could you please give me a financial plan? Could you please come up with different logos? And could you then develop a website?
Wow.
In approximately 4.5 minutes, all of that was done. All of it. Okay.
Wow.
Right. That's the other thing that people don't realize. The big thing will be people will simply ask, what does your media team actually do? Okay.
Yeah. And
If
that's
it
the
can be
question
done
the
at this
client will
scale.
ask.
Right.
Yeah.
And so what happens is those are the two things, which is I would basically say, well, my media team and everybody else's media team is going to have these tools. So my media team is going to basically bring their intelligence, including intelligence about messaging and other insights, and will basically utilize, just like in the old days, they had typewriters, then they had Excel spreadsheets, then they had Adobe, then they had, right?
Correct.
They're going to use these tools. But what will happen is I believe there will be fewer people working in the industry,
Cool.
right? And that no one is saying that part loud. I'm saying that part loud. That's in my new book, which is my basic belief is every large company will have fewer employees. In fact, I build the case that next year companies
Hmm.
will have 10 to 20% fewer employees. That big,
Wow.
okay? And not a single person in management is actually saying that aloud. They should.
So that's a reality which will hit almost everybody, at least the services
Everybody.
part of the business.
And the way to see it is look, I'll tell you, go look at what Meta is doing. Meta's headcount, their revenues are up about 20% in the last couple of years. Their headcount is down 20%.
Okay.
Okay. What you're going to basically see, you're going to see this in Google. For instance, people said like the best job in the world was to be a coder, or the best
Uh-huh.
language to learn was Mandarin. Okay. Both of those are no longer true. You can translate in real time Mandarin using the latest Samsung phones. And maybe people
Absolutely.
don't want to do business in China as much. Maybe they should learn Hindi. Okay. But the other one, which is important, is there's a 25% decline in software jobs in the United States in the last 2 years. The software
That's
coding. Okay.
absolutely.
And so my whole
And
basic belief is do not ask for whom the bell tolls. The technology companies are already doing it, and it's coming to all of us. And it doesn't necessarily mean that total jobs will be down. What could happen is you for any current job, it may be 25% less. But you may have new things like, hey, by the way, my media company now is doing creative
okay,
because now I
that's
know how,
another area.
because now I can do creative, right?
Absolutely.
And I can do these other things. But your existing thing will become 20 to 25% more efficient and effective. But that doesn't mean you can't reimagine your business. And if you reimagine your business, that might be added jobs.
Interesting. So I think leaders need to start reimagining their business and sort of figure out where the next levers of growth are, and then that's the direction to move into.
Yes.
Rishad, this is a follow-up question to now that AI will sort of do a lot of media planning, buying, and reduce the workforce. Who takes the responsibility if something goes wrong? If AI is planning a media campaign, and if something goes wrong, who is to be held responsible? Will the large language model take responsibility, or the other guys who sort of working on those? Where does the buck stop in
I
those
would, I
that
would,
case?
I would basically say it's going to probably be the company that's using the large language models, right? So, for instance, let's say you're a agency today and you run a ad that ends up in the wrong area of social media. Your client is going to basically say, "What the hell did you do?" You can
Absolutely,
turn around and start blaming Meta. Okay. Meta will say, "Who cares? You're one of 1 million
advertisers.
or one of 8 million advertisers. Forget you. Okay, you don't count." Well, people also, so the whole idea is it is going to be you because you're going to basically say, the client's going to basically say, "I hired you. You're supposed to use the right tools. If you didn't use the right tools, that's not my problem." So it's going to be you, which is again one of the reasons why people are going to be important, which is yes, the machine will do this, but someone's got to check it. Because if you just let the
Absolutely,
machine do it, there'd be three problems, right? One is if you just let the machine do it, A, you'll be blamed if something goes wrong. Okay. B, if you let the machine do it, no machine can do anything that is dealing with human beings completely by itself because human beings are very squishy people. But the third is if you let the machine do it, your client's going to say, "Why do we pay you?"
correct.
Right? And so the idea really is the biggest challenge, I think, for the media business is many media businesses, and it's not just media, it's creative. In fact, if you're a consulting business, if you're a law firm, is most of these businesses, about 80 to 90% of their revenue is basically based on hourly rates. It's called,
True.
full-time equivalents. That's the big shift because no one is going to pay you as many hours ever again. And so the whole idea is if you cannot become 15 to 20% productive really fast, you don't have a business model.
Wow. In India, maybe slightly different, but yeah, everybody's sort of got to pull up the socks and
And what I
go
will
with the flow.
and I will tell you, a lot of people tell me India is going to be different. I'll tell you how India is going to be different.
Uh,
India is going to go faster in this than the rest of the world, even though you all think you're going to go slower, because India adapts technology really, really fast. And one of the most amazing things that India happens to have is multiple languages. This is fantastic for multiple language optimization.
okay, interesting.
Okay. So if in India you all think this ain't coming, wake up.
No, it's there,
Right.
but people are trying to say, okay, let it take its own pace
It's going to
of
take its own
diffusion.
pace. Yeah, it's not going to take its own pace. You wake up in the morning and you won't have a job unless you think about it, and then you could actually have a bigger company because you're thinking about it. But don't not think about it, and don't think this is a 2027 problem. I would say you're going to feel it in 2025 and in big ways in 2026.
Hmm. So, Rishad, now as a follow-up question is, given that the client and agency structure, will that metamorphose? Because a lot of clients will figure out, listen, I can do a DIY myself
Yeah.
for most part. So some of them may reduce business or eliminate the need for the agency. Maybe
The,
the
the,
big ones will keep them. The smaller ones may just sort of figure out I can sort of manage it. How will that play out? And as a media agency, as a business may shrink, um, how will that play out?
so I'll give you an indication of how it seems to be playing out in the West. And because I haven't operated, I come to India, but because I've not worked in India, though obviously I'm familiar with what happens in India. And my company, when I used to work there, had lots of people in India. So I'm not saying I'm completely unclear, but I wouldn't say I know the Indian market well. But here's what I would say. I'm going to use the United States. So the United States, today, if you look at most of the large holding companies, you will find something very interesting that most of their or not a significant, the largest portion of their revenues and profits, 30, 40, 50%, come from their media companies.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that has grown as technology has advanced, that continues to grow, which is kind of interesting, right?
Sounds counterintuitive.
It's counterintuitive. And the reason it isn't is because the media business is now increasingly the whole business. Okay. And what tends to basically happen is the media business, for three reasons, becomes the whole business. The first is it's the data business. So that's where the
Yeah.
biggest data flows happen. Second, increasingly because of AI as well as new tools, it becomes the messaging business. Third, there are multiple media companies in addition to the ones we buy, and they're called influencers. Okay.
True.
So if you look, for instance, at the company I worked for, Publicis Group, in the United States, actually globally, but like let's look here. The person who runs their media business, a guy called Dave Penske, he's not the CEO anymore of Publicis Media. There's a gentleman called Chris Booth who's the CEO of Publicis Media. Chris Booth reports to David Penske, and David Penske is the CEO of Connected Media. And what is in Connected Media? Okay. Connected Media is the full media business. It's Epsilon, the data business. It's Influential, the influencer business. It's Digitas and Razorfish, the creative businesses, right?
Correct.
So what isn't in the media business are basically some of the creative agencies, the PR agencies, and Sapient. But everything else is the media business, right? So one is I basically believe the media business, by being more complex, by having all these things, will not allow the large clients to actually do it themselves. The small clients already do it. Majority of people who are on Google and on Meta are small companies. They don't need anybody. But the middle-sized to larger companies will need it as long as there's complexity. This whole idea of in-housing, yes, it'll continue. But there was this whole thing that the world is going to be just Google and Meta. And so we're going to just do like in-housing. Well, outside of even AI and all these other things, it turned out it wasn't Google and Meta. In addition to
Absolutely.
Google and Meta and WhatsApp and Snap, you began to have the Amazon retail networks and the other
Absolutely.
things, right? And it became far more fragmented. And I always
True.
remind people, clients can fire agencies, but clients find it very difficult to fire themselves.
True.
Okay. And in the US, and I'm sure this is true in India, and it's definitely true in Europe, you hire a bunch of people, it's very hard to get rid of them. You can give the agency 90 days notice. It's much, much harder with severance and everything to get rid. If the world is moving so fast, why do you want to reduce your flexibility? That doesn't mean that clients won't have significant in-house media expertise and some media buying and planning, but I doubt that's going to be the dominant form because of the complexity. You just need to do so. It's not that you press one button and everything gets done, right?
True.
Even when it's AI, like when I basically tell people, I said, look, even when I don't plan or buy anybody, but when I use AI, I have 7 different AI interfaces I use by myself,
Really?
just one. Yeah,
Okay.
because in effect, if I want to do something with imaging today, the best thing with imaging is something um, basically called midjourney. If I
Midjourney.
if I if I want to do something with video, right, it's more likely I'll use a Sora or a Veo. If I want to do multimodal, I'll probably do Gemini. If I want to do writing, I'll probably use Claude and Anthropic. Okay,
True.
and then I'll mix and mash them together. And so the whole idea is every advance in technology does two things. It increases complexity. It increases speed, but it increases complexity. But the other thing it does, and this is what I really believe that the people who run companies in India need to focus on, it places a premium on superior talent.
Mm.
Okay? Because what happens is technology is like this slingshot that allows David to bring down Goliath.
True.
Okay? But you got to have very good Davids and Daniels. or in this case, Ram and Sita's or whatever. You got to have very good ones, okay? Because in effect, as I tell people, just think about it. Everything is going to a model where, let's suppose, you have this podcast, okay? Now, just think about the fact that 10 years ago, you could not have had this podcast, okay?
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
you would not have had the equipment, you would not have the distribution platforms of Spotify, Apple, or whatever it is, right? Uh, it just wouldn't work. 15 years ago, you couldn't really have a YouTube channel. It just wouldn't work.
True.
Okay,
Yeah.
now you do. Okay, now all of us have the channel. Now, why is it that Mr. Beast has so many people globally? Because
Oh,
Mr.
yeah.
Beast is very talented, while Mr. Rishad isn't. So the fact simply is, when Mr. Beast is talented, everybody in the world now can get to Mr. Beast,
Absolutely.
right? So what basically happens is, if you are really talented, technology can actually enhance the talent.
It's a huge
It's a multiplier
enabler.
effect. Yeah, it's
A
like a
multiplier
lever.
effect.
It's a lever,
It's a lever.
right? So it's a famous saying with, Archimedes basically said, give me a place to stand and a lever long enough and I'll move the world. Okay, the lever
True.
long enough is going to be AI. The place to stand is what are you world class at.
Got you. Interesting. So, Rishad, my next follow-up question is going to be about the state of the media. And then let's say news media and in particular print media is sort of uh, on a decline in the U.S. In India, it's sort of still holding strong, or still holding flat. I wouldn't say strong, but do you see that changing
Yes.
in over time?
Yes.
Because in US predominantly everything is digital, but India is a mismatch of everything.
Yeah.
Everything is sort of surviving under the sun right now.
Right now, everything is surviving over the sun. That's perfectly fine. But I would say if you look even broadly in India, there are two reasons things are surviving. One is because the population is so large and more people are both getting educated and going into the workforce. In many ways, newspapers and print media tend to basically be a way to basically learn and to signal that you have arrived.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, that's number one. Number two is right now, it's very interesting. I think the video ecosystem in India is stronger than the digital print ecosystem in India, or the digital
Absolutely, yeah.
information ecosystem. So if you're actually seeing in India, something opposite is happening, which is in the US, it first came after newspapers and then magazines and then radio and then TV. In the US, I think digital is first coming after TV, right? It's the
Right.
opposite. And why is it? Two reasons. One is because of the 7 or 8 or 9 year impact of geo, right?
Oh,
Which significantly reduced. Second is the massive decline in costs of mobile phones. And when in India, people tend to, even today, maybe not, they can afford a television, but they don't have the physical space to have television, or to sit and gather around television. Everybody now has their own television in their pocket.
absolutely.
Okay. So in effect, it has basically aligned with, I can watch video anywhere I want, including in my own privacy, in a country where there's very little space. Okay. Um, and that's number one. And as a result, it's, and now increasingly can translate. But the other one is the world's biggest market, not in dollars, but in usage of platforms like YouTube, are India.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. And so what has tended to basically happen is, and then the other one is in a country which obviously is getting more and more literate, but you need a much less literary sort of sophistication to watch than to read,
True.
right? And so what has tended to happen is, in an odd way, India is doing the opposite, which is TV is being. I think TV will be affected faster than print.
because everybody is now, a podcaster,
Yeah.
a content creator, and a lot of journalists are
Yeah.
having their own YouTube channel. So
Yeah,
that
and that is a big thing. And so what tends to basically happen is in the world of, and that's interestingly, in the world of online print, here's what basically happened is in the United States, what ate the newspapers
hmm,
was Google, was search. Okay.
true.
Because if you actually think about there's classified advertising, automobile advertising, most of that. So that search, right? What ate the magazines was social media.
Hmm,
Okay. Instagram is the new Condé Nast, etc. Okay.
correct.
And in effect, now television is being eaten by Netflix and YouTube. But what happened is that now the biggest downturn in the magazine and newspaper industry, or the magazine and newspaper industry that exists now in the United States, is now the best writers are discovering that because the magazines and newspapers are in such financial trouble, that they can get paid better if they launch their own Substack with a subscription. So
Absolutely.
you're now seeing significant talent leaving from all of these magazines and newspapers and starting their own thing, right? And that will also eventually happen. But if somebody could actually launch a video channel, they do that first. Now the other is like I use Substack to write my Sunday thought letter. So my Sunday thought letter, which is free, reaches 30,000 people every Sunday.
Oh,
I reach more CEOs and CMOs than Ad Age and Adweek do. Okay.
well,
And I'm a one-person company. Now, if I decided to, which I am not doing, is I could make it multimedia. Substack is not no longer print. You can do audio, you can do video, you can do all kinds of stuff. So everything becomes, full frontal. But I've just decided I'm going to do different things. I'm going to launch a YouTube channel around my new book, Rethinking Work, right? Because I'm going to show architecting of different places. I'm going to show agents in action, all of those things, which
got
is more visual. But so in effect, the long story is I think all media increasingly is going to become digital.
absolutely.
Okay.
That trend is there.
That trend is there. There'll always be this sort of print thing, but the print will increasingly become a audience that is older and older and older. Now, that's not a bad thing. In the US, older and older people still watch regular television and print. That's also who have lots of money, so that's fine. But there's that entire thing. But I would say that digital is happening. It's going to happen much faster, including in India, right? Um, and what will tend to happen is you'll eventually see that almost everything will become multimedia versus becoming, print. As someone who writes books, it's sad, but
Huh,
the reality of it is go check what's happened on Google. I don't know if most of you realize that Google now has two new tabs. Okay. One which you have to sign up as beta for, which I have called AI. So in my Google search, it basically says yes, AI. Actually a tab called
correct.
AI. But the one I want people to look at is it used to have a thing called video.
Okay,
It's still there. But next to it is short videos.
got you. Yeah,
Okay.
true.
Because increasingly, what people are saying, including in schools and the universities here, is people can't spend more than 3 or 4 minutes watching something and they get bored.
Oh yeah, that is the attention span has just come down drastically.
Right. And so the attention span, you know, to do anything longer form becomes hard. And that's also what is opposed to print. So in many ways, I think print is a status symbol in India. It's not necessarily an information gathering device in India.
Now I've been reading. There's a lot of AR, VR, and all those kind of equipment is sort of going to proliferate. We've seen the Meta,
Yeah.
Oculus, and all those kind of things that are going to come up. Do you think that will become mainstream, or that is just a fad that's going to happen? Do
So
you
I think
envisage a situation where people are putting on those goggles and walking on the streets
so.
at scale?
So augmented reality, I think in a couple, 2, 3 years, in certain markets that can afford it, will become quite scaled. Okay. So for instance, I've tried, but I'm not using the Meta, Ray-Ban glasses. I've seen
Hmm.
it. Um, I do use, but I don't walk around with it. The very expensive Apple Vision Pro, which I own. I've got one right here next to me. Okay.
Okay.
I see Apple Vision Pro as the future of television in a very
Oh, really?
interesting
Okay.
way. Yeah. So, for instance, or the future of video. So, because in effect, and it's also a form of, interestingly, if you have a small computer and you put one of these things on, you get a huge computer in front of you, right? Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's basically it's a little bit different. So it's about that. But the reason why I think these will be very augmented reality will be very, very big is because I believe augmented reality combined with these headphones, okay, is where AI will come to the masses.
Gotcha.
Okay. Because in effect, there's an old movie, it's about 10, 12 years old, called Her, where somebody falls in love with their operating system and they have a pair of glasses and headphones. And so, for
All
instance,
right.
I would say, who is Gautam? So while I'm talking to you, right, on my little thing, there's a little overlay, and it basically gives me your Wikipedia entry or your rap
Gotcha.
sheet
Oh,
from
wow.
being in prison, right, or whatever it is, right? So in effect, because in effect, what happens is the future of AI is not going to be prompts. The
Okay.
future of AI is conversations.
Hmm. So it's just like you and I having a
Yeah.
conversation.
So I'm just talking to somebody. So, like, I could say, tell me, Gautam has given me this question. I don't know what the answer is. So I expect, so can you please provide me a perspective and answer? Okay. Or I'm giving Gautam some numbers. Can you please check? So, to that. And what tends to basically happen is it'll provide me that um, in a very interesting sort of way. Or I could basically say, I am looking at something.
Gotcha.
Can you please tell me where I am? What am I looking at? Okay, I'm in front of Red Fort. Give me the history of Red Fort.
Got-
Okay, and so the ability to just look and ask a question is what these will be about. But
abs-
obviously, it's still too expensive. Even in the millions of them sold in the U.S., but it's still too expensive. But I believe over time that it will become prevalent. I think first, obviously, in the West. More, this is one thing where, because it's the technology, it's still going to be expensive, and you have to manufacture it, and it's all of that. But it's coming. But what I would say is, right now, of course, AI doesn't need anything but conversation. So you could just talk to your phone, right? And what we do know is everybody is going to carry their mobile device with them. So the entire idea is, if your mobile device gets more powerful and you can connect it to world-class AI and something else, you might initially not. It's just like what it was, not Google Glasses, Google Specs or whatever. The whole idea basically is, I forget what the thing, where you can point to something on Google and they'll tell you what it is.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the thing. So the underlying technologies are there. What's now missing is a cost-effective interface device that doesn't look bulky. Like, I can't go running around. I look like I don't even wear, unless I'm going for a really long distance flight. Like, I'm coming to India for Goa Fest, and it's going to be like a long flight. That's when I take my Apple Vision Pro and put it actually on my stupid face on the plane. Okay, because I'm sitting by myself and it's a long ride. Because I prefer to watch television that way,
Got you.
and I have my
So,
own shows. Yeah.
what do you think about the future of the social media companies? Because now the whole world has got into endless scrolling. It's become, part of our DNA. You think that is going to change? Because
Yeah. So
what will change that? What will sort of
AI,
disrupt that?
so AI
Uh,
AI will both change it, but it might also support them. So right now, if you notice, until Trump did his tariff stuff, the companies that did best because of AI outside of the AI companies like Nvidia were Google and Meta and others, right? Because in effect, all of them have the three things that you require for AI. The first thing that they have is a lot of data and scientists. Second is
yeah,
you need lots of capital,
which they
right?
have in abundance.
Abundance. But third is they also have the way most people will interact with AI. They have the interfaces, right?
Correct.
So now you see it in Meta, you see it in Google, you see it on Amazon. They have these interfaces. So I think the difference will be that today online, there are two primarily ways people interact: search and scrolling,
Absolutely.
right? You search, you scroll. I think the third interface will be conversations.
Okay.
Okay. And what happens is, if you notice, that's why more and more both Google and Meta and everybody is doing a lot of stuff that's voice related and
Got you.
augmented reality, because it's much easier to have a conversation when you're on the go,
True.
right? And so the third will be conversations. So I believe what will happen is social media will continue, but it will be somewhat different. And if you also notice in the US, today the social medias that tend to be like, even if you look at Meta, Facebook is flattish to getting old. It's Instagram and WhatsApp. WhatsApp is really conversation, and Instagram is really imagery, short pictures and images, if you think about it. Um, and in many ways, as we go down the line, I think this conversation augmented with image or video, which is what really AR is, augmented, reality, will be a big deal.
Got you. Interesting. Rishad, I was just sort of reading an article in 2010. You had made a series of predictions in the Economic Times, about 10 set of
Yeah,
predictions, which turned out to be true in 10
all
years
ten,
from
all
now.
10 of them turned out
All
to be
10,
true.
yeah, I know. It sort of hit the bullseye. What are the top 4 or 5 predictions that you're making for the year 2030, 2035? What are the next 5 or 10 set of predictions that you see happening of unfolding over the next few years?
So I would say that the uh, so the 10 for in my piece, which I originally wrote in 4 years ago, right? Um, I'll tell you what. So I wrote this in 2021, which is the next 10 years.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to just let's see 4 years later how whether any of these are in the right direction or whether I'm missing them completely. Okay, so the first one, as I said, we are no longer going to basically have a US dominated global world. We're going to have a multipolar global world where China is going to have its own thing, the US is going to have its own thing, Europe is going to have its own thing, and India is going to soon have its own thing. I think we're heading in that direction,
Absolutely. Yeah.
right? Second is the world is going to suffer from declining population, aging population, and very different mindsets between young people and old people.
I think those demographic
That's
trends are
happening,
playing out.
right?
That's happening. Absolutely.
Third is, I said, the future will have much more AI, VR, and next generation cloud computing. It's happening,
True.
right? Fourth
Yeah.
is, while COVID will be cured, it'll still have major impacts on the way companies are done, social operations, who you trust, etc., which is happening. Like, people don't believe in vaccines, right? So those are
Very
some of
true.
some of the key things. Now, so as a result, those are what I said are going to happen, all
And there's a
happening. Then I said,
what
based
happened.
on that, I have 10 predictions. New models of governance will exist, which is today's what people are basically rebelling against is the current system of governance is 1945. It's post World War II, where,
True.
right, but there was not a big China, not a big India, all of that. Second, there'll be a workplace revolution, which is what my book is, which is work is completely going to be different. And that's what most management companies don't realize, right? We've entered an age of debossification, work from anywhere. It's coming in very big ways, right?
We'll talk about that
Right.
after this, Sophie.
Third is that saving capitalism from the capitalists, which is capitalism actually works, but right now we have crony capitalism in most countries. It's who you know,
A-
right?
Absolutely.
So
There are
what is it?
connections.
Yeah, four is the biggest breakthrough that AI will be on medicine, biotech, and gene therapies. That's starting to happen, right? Five, we're going to have a new financial and trading ecosystem.
Okay.
Six, there's going to be a renaissance in education, because of two reasons. You can educate much faster because of AI, but because half-life of knowledge is going down, people are going to have to go back to school, right?
True.
To
And
learn
the need
certain
to
things.
constantly educate yourself.
Yeah. Seven is the automobile industry will be very, very different, which you're already beginning to see, where now the biggest exporter and the biggest leader in automobiles is China, not Japan,
Oh, yes.
not the
Not
United
Japan.
States, right? Eight, the big currency for everybody, including brands, is going to be trust. Because in an AI age, who can you trust,
Oh, yes.
right? Nine is creative will be the key. Creativity will be the key differentiator, and all of us can be creators. This was 5 years
Very
ago.
true.
All of this happening. 10, right? And then 10 is more of a hope, sort of prediction. Is enlightenment and connection will have greater market share than enragement and polarization. That hasn't happened yet. Okay.
Can you explain that? What does it mean? I mean,
So
in
so
simple
right
terms?
now, so right now, people are very polarized and everybody gets angry at everybody else. My basic belief is that's an unsteady state. And as more people get access to more tools and I get more connected, that will actually be more important than basically saying, I want to stop the world, I want to disconnect. Right? So
Gotcha.
right now, everybody says in the US, the Republicans hate the Democrats and the United States wants to disconnect from the world. So that's both polarization and enragement. I basically believe any country that does that in the long run won't win. That we're in a connected world where enlightenment and education is going to be critical. And just
Absolutely.
running around saying, I hate everybody and I want to disconnect is not going to be the long term solution. Now, right now, my first nine, all indications are it's working in the right direction. On number 10, it isn't seem to be working in that direction at all.
All right. So we'll see. Any timelines for it to all this to plan out?
It was all it's
I-
just 10 years, so we're 4 or 5 years
10
in.
years.
And right now, in the first 4 or 5 years in, the first nine I could say are happening very fast. The 10th one is not yet.
So, Rishad, a lot of companies, especially the social media companies, have built their business empires on user data. The poor user has no choice but to sort of, inadvertently give his data, or they take it away without even the end user knowing it. Do you see a day where there exists a technology where the end user gets compensated for some of the data that he provides, knowingly or unknowingly?
Yeah, so right now, these companies will tell you that they are providing you compensation by letting you connect to your friends all over the world, by letting you search for different things. And you should be happy. But the reality of it is, if it was fair, um, then most of the people would make at least some portion of the money that a Mark Zuckerberg and a Sergey Brin and others make, right? So they do provide value, but for about 5 cents that they provide you, or 5 paise, they take 95 paise, right?
True.
And what you want to do is you want to say, I prefer 50 or 30 paise or 40 paise versus five. Not that they won't have a lot because they run the business and they provide interfaces. So I think there are three areas there. The first one is over time, I'd always hoped that blockchain would be the way to do it, either through, sort of blockchain has the ability to basically say, I am going to let you see my data, but it's like a drive-through window. I open my window, you get my data, but it's for this one time
Got you.
and it's done. Uh, but now I think what's going to increasingly beginning to happen is because of AI, not only is that data going to be sort of much more important for these companies, but the big thing is it's going to be less data. It's going to be actually be intellectual capital. So I think the real struggle isn't going to be about data. It's going to basically be, you first took my data, which is who I am, what am I doing, and where I am. The real challenge is now you're going to take all my work and make your machines work on it. So right now, all these suits between all the AI companies, and by the way, most of the AI companies also happen to be the social media companies,
True.
right? Besides
Big ones.
OpenAI,
Yeah.
right? So what basically they've done is they've trained on all of our information. Now, when you go check for me on any of these engines, because I write so much for free and I put it without any constraints, I have no problem them reading my stuff because I don't charge. But if I was making money in that way, that would be a real problem. For me, I provided that so I look really good in the engines. And because I've begun to realize that the engines are the new search engines. AI is the way people are now discovering you more than even search. Not more than, but increasingly like search, not
True.
nowhere near. And so what basically begins to happen is, I think, is how do we make sure not only don't they pillage our data, but they don't pillage our minds? So the data is now less important, and I think that's going to require copyright laws. They're going to have these lawsuits because so on one end, I'm hoping that blockchain goes through over time, which is this is my stuff, you're using my stuff. The other one really is laws and suits. But up to now, despite this being an issue, they have continued to harvest us, and we have continued to let them do that.
Absolutely. We have no choice. So moving on, Rishad, let's talk about your new book, Rethinking Work. Can you just sort of give us an overview
Sure.
of the book and
Sure.
what is it about?
Absolutely. So the first is the good, interesting thing is because I grew up in India, my books, including this one, was issued in the United States and India on exactly the same day. Those are the
Wonderful.
two countries that they launch. And it's available. Rethinking Work is available in everything from Flipkart to Amazon to Crossword Bookstore. And it's about 385 or 390 rupees. Very cheap. So it's available. So one of the key things is I basically believe the following 3 points. Number one, that work is central to human experience, that in addition to our health and our relationships, meaningful, purposeful, rewarding work is what makes us happy.
True.
In fact, if you have meaningful, purposeful, rewarding work, you're likely to live longer and also have great relationships. Number two, work is more likely, and this is global, this is not just US or India, work is going to change more between 2019 and 2029 than it
Hmm.
has in the previous 50 years.
Okay.
Number three, what people are fixating about is where you work has very little to do with the future of work. And it's actually an excuse for people to not think about the future of work. Okay.
Got
So that's my basic belief. Work is huge, central, will change significantly, and no one's paying attention. In fact, so that's the opening thought. Very quickly, the book is divided into 3 parts. The first is 5 chapters on what are the 5 reasons why I believe work is changing so much. And the impact of COVID happens to be one of those 5. And that is less about where you work, but why you work and what you think of your boss. Okay.
true.
So you're basically saying, why do I need a boss? And
Yeah.
what does my boss do? Right. So that's one. And so when the boss says, come back under my control, right? They're not saying, come back to my office. It says, let me control you again. And their whole stuff is less the office resistance, it's the boss resistance. So
Got
that's number 5. But the first 4 really is about social changes, aging populations, declining populations, different mindsets. Second is technologies like AI. Third is the rise of gig work. A lot of people, especially young people, including in Asia, are doing a side hustle, side gig, TikTok,
All of those
whatever it
things. Yeah.
is, right? The fourth is the rise of marketplaces. And marketplaces are things like Amazon Web Services, Shopify, whatever the Indian marketplaces are, where you can both buy and sell your services,
Got you.
or you can do art.
Yeah.
So you take those 5, and the whole world of work is changing. So basically, any CEO who's read those 5 chapters says, how come nobody told me? And I said, everybody told you, but nobody told you the way I've said it out. Because
Got,
I don't have a screed. I'm not yelling at you. I'm saying fact, 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 fact. Okay. Um, the next 4 chapters are what everybody should do right away. This includes, by the way, in India.
okay.
We've discussed this. One is how do you change your company and how do you connect humans and AI to run your company?
Got
We've
it.
talked about that.
Absolutely.
Second one is how do you retrain what a leader is? There's going to be less need for a boss. There's going to be a need for a leader. So a boss is a zone of control. A leader is a zone of influence. A boss
That's
monitors, checks in,
okay.
uh, allocates, delegates. A leader creates, makes, mentors, influences, inspires.
Inspires.
Okay.
True.
So that's the second one. The third one is basically a new type of employee. So if, for instance, many companies are going to require 50 to 20% less people to do what they currently do, what are they going to do? There are three ways of doing it. One is decide not to make any profits and keep everybody on. That's not going to happen. Okay. Second is you get rid of 20% of people. But which 20%? And when you get rid of 20%, it's really bad even for the 80% that live around, because they say, my friend has gone, what's wrong with my company?
Absolutely.
Instead, why don't you at the end of every year ask everybody, next year, would you like to work 60%, 80%, or 100%?
Okay.
Okay. And some people will say, I need to work 100% because I need the salary.
True.
Other people will say, I actually want to work 80% because the other 20% I'd like to spend doing new things as I'm about to retire, or I like to spend time with my kids who are new, or I want to, spend a bit more time with my aging parents.
So
Right?
flexi time is going to be the norm, is what you're saying?
Yeah. So it's flexi time in the fact that you're an employee. So it's not like a freelance. You are an
Hmm.
employee. So you get in India, this is not as much of an issue as in the US. You get healthcare benefits, 100% healthcare benefits,
Correct.
but everything else you get 60% bonus, incentive, 60%, 80%, 100%. At the end of every year, you turn around and say, and the company can decide whether they will actually give you. So it's like a marketplace, which is the company asks everybody who's eligible, 60, 80, 100.
So which companies are you seeing in the US at least follow this norm? Because I don't think,
So
at least I can't think of any Indian companies, but which
so 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 in a small form, I started to do it at Publicis for my
okay,
teams, and that's how I built some of the best teams. I had the best teams in the world. How did I build them? Because I could get people to work from anywhere, and they could work 60% while launching another business 40% of their time, as long as it wasn't competitive,
okay.
right? I could I could cut my costs or move my variability up and down.
So
So
there's
I
a
could
very high
basically,
degree of autonomy that was given to people.
yeah, I gave autonomy, and what they did is they came and they basically turned to me. I could go to a client and say, listen, I got experts in this, that they're so expert they even have a side business. Okay. But if, let's say a client says, I want somebody on my business 100%, I said, okay, you can get this. Here's my 100% person. But otherwise, clients would say, I really like this person. I don't want them to leave. So I said, they're not leaving. They're going to work for us 60%. They're still going to be on your business. I'm going to couple them with someone else who is there 100% that this guy manages or that lady manages. So you are covered. But now you have your world best the talent you want. I'm still giving you the same cost structure, but I'm giving you more people,
Hmm.
right? But what it requires is a certain degree of flexibility and trust. So all these companies say we trust our people. I said, why don't you trust your people? Trust them. Okay. But here's what happens is now you could actually reduce your headcount by 20% without any layoffs,
Got you.
right? And then suddenly when you have an acute thing, you bring everybody back 100% without having to go fire people. So
So
the
it's like an
reality of it is
on-demand work. It's like
on
on-demand
demand. So it's
model.
on demand, but it's your employee versus a freelancer you may not get.
Got
You know they've got them. You can plan it. So and then the last one really is to rethink about what the office is.
hmm.
So I believe in-person interaction when you and I get together, let's say physically once in a while, is good, right? But you can do a lot of other things. Look, we're doing this. You're in India, I'm here,
True.
right? So when people say you can't have a conversation, I say, what's bullshit? Okay, that's total nonsense. Okay. So the question is not how do I get people back to the office? The question is how do I maximize the benefits of in-person interaction, right? So fine, if you want to have training, who says you have to have training in the office? You could have training at a school, right? If you want to build relationships, you can do it at a bar or a restaurant. Okay.
True.
So the whole idea is if I basically tell somebody, if you're wanting to launch a company today, would you launch a company without a lot of AI, without flexible workforce, new types of leaders, and we have big offices? Nobody, not a single CEO says that. Not one says, agree, I'll do that. So why are you going back to that then? You're competitive. It's a new world order. If I'm competing with you, I'm not going to have my hands tied like this. 100% employees, big office in a particular place, not going AI first. Why would I
But
do that?
but in the US also, all the big companies are calling back the people. Amazon is calling. I heard
But
Mastercard also is
that's actually, yeah, but here's the stuff. That's actually a big fat lie.
really
Okay, that's
okay.
what most people don't realize. Here's what happens. Compared to 2 years ago, they're calling back, right? But let me tell you this. The reality of it is 66% of companies basically now have either fully remote or hybrid work.
Okay.
Okay. So only 1/3 of the companies say come back 4 or 5 days. In that 1/3 that call for 4 or 5 days, there are two reasons they're doing it. One is it's a way to get rid of middle managers who are least likely to want to do that. So they're getting rid of headcount without severance.
Oh, okay.
Okay. The second is if you go probing inside most of those companies, they don't have enough real estate to bring everybody back. They cut down on real estate, the employees have increased. What they're doing is on the side, they're making exceptions. Most companies have exceptions for 30% of the people,
Okay, got
right?
you.
So what you're basically saying is, I'm not going to let anybody do whatever they want to do. I want everybody to come back to the office 4 days a week. Okay. And then one of your high performers says, no, I'm not going to do that. You'll say, fine, you can stay at home. One of your low performers say, I'm not going to do that. Say, okay, you've lost your job, no severance.
So in this context, in this milieu, how does one sort of stand out? Because it's going to be flexible, it's going to be on demand, it's going to be all of those things. Now, if you are a 30-year-old, something young chap who's sort of trying to grow his career, who's got
Yeah.
a 30-year runway ahead of him, how does one plan his career given all this
Okay.
constraint? And how does one plan to achieve the top management or the corner office?
So that happens to be the last 5 chapters of my book.
Yeah.
Okay. Which basically says what will work look like in 2029. So start preparing. You have a 30-year-old, you start preparing for what it's looking like, besides what you're dealing with here. Very specifically, one of the things I tell people is they need to learn how to operate like companies of one. So one of the most
You,
powerful things I've written is
can you
called
explain that?
Company of One. Yeah.
Okay.
So a company of one is that even if you're in a company of 100,000, you should think of yourself as an individual company. What do I mean by that? Okay. If you're a company, you go out of business unless you have customers.
Yeah.
Why will a customer come to a company? A customer comes to a company because they have unique solutions and skills. So ask yourself, what unique skills are you building? What skills are you building that are world class that people want to hire you for? You're a company of one. Okay. Number two, let's say you've built these skills. Fine. But if nobody knows you exist, who the hell cares? So spend time building a reputation for yourself.
Okay.
Right. Third is we're living in a world which is going to be highly connected. So show us how you're going to be very collaborative. So build collaborative skills, communication skills, partnering skills, right? Now, if you have those, you can do a great job inside your current company.
Gotcha.
But because you have a reputation, because you have a skill set, and you can collaborate and communicate, you can easily get a job outside your company,
Got you.
right? Or you can launch your own company. And so my basic belief is the day you don't, if you think HR, right, and people development are taking care of your career, bullshit. They work for the company. They don't work for you. They've never done so, and they never will.
So it's a
You
different
are your
mental
own HR
model.
department.
So it's a
Yes,
mental
you are your own.
model.
It's a mental model shift. Company of one. And I've written it's on my Substack at rishad.substack.com. If people type in, or even if they go to Google and say company of one, Rishad Tobaccowala, there's 6 pieces I've written on how to do it step by step by step. Okay, which tens of thousands of people have read. And my basic belief is everything I write there is free. My book isn't, but it's 400 rupees. It shows exactly. So universities are now asking me, they said, you have not only, I do step by step on how to do it. And my own stuff is the biggest investment you can make is in yourself. Why aren't you doing that?
True. I mean, we live in a knowledge economy, so obviously, this sort of holds
Right.
true for a knowledge economy, where you've got to sort of, be able to have a domain expertise, be able to communicate, be able to sort of build a reputation. Those three
Yeah.
things that you mentioned. Okay, interesting. So just to sort of, as we wrap it up, a couple of questions on career planning. Now, we spoke about career planning, but how does a young individual, especially in a country like India where jobs are hard to come by, how does one sort of plan his career or looking forward? Any practical advice for a 25-year-old, somebody who's just a freshly minted college graduate? How does one plan his life ahead? Uh,
Sure.
because
So, so here's a key thing to plan your life ahead. Uh, I'll give you some top line, and then I'll also tell people to go Google something called Career Lessons Revisited, Rishad Tobaccowala, and you'll see it in great detail. And everything I'm asking you to Google or search, everything is free. So I'm not charging anybody anything. So Career Lessons Revisited basically says to somebody new, the first thing you want to basically do is think long term. You're going to have a 50-year career. So stop worrying about like what happened in this meeting or what's going to happen in the next 3 months. It's 50-year career. If you're 25, you're going to work till 70, 75. So just 20, you're going to work till 70. And you're going to work till 70 even if you become a multimillionaire at 30, because you're not just going to sit around looking at, I don't know, a wall for 40 years. You might do other things, right?
true,
Because central work is not only about money, it's about identity, growth, purpose, community. So that's one. Two, you're going to have to learn to continuously learn because the half-life of knowledge is going low. Three, if given a choice early in your career between more money and a great mentor, choose the great mentor.
hmm,
Okay. Fourth, think about where the future industries are and the future trends align with those trends. May the force be with you, right? So align with the trend. Go for an AI-driven company. Go for a biotech-driven company. Go for companies that are built around talent. Okay, because those seem to be the interesting things, if that makes sense. Um, five is start building a reputation uh, of collaboration, right, and things like that. And sixth, where you can, try to have more than one income stream
true.
in
Yeah.
because you want to have some optionality. And those are some of those. I have like 12 of them, but those are some of the top ones.
Wonderful. I think these are very relevant points. I think it's applicable to almost all age groups and all sorts of people. Huh?
Yeah,
I mean, I personally resonate with some of them that you mentioned over here.
yeah, and in fact, those are very, you can go check. It's simply called Career Lessons Revisited, Rishad Tobaccowala, and you will basically see what that is and why hundreds of thousands of people have read that.
Got you. So, Rishad, as we wind up, I know there's a limitation in time. So, any final thoughts for people in India? Anything that you would sort of want
Yeah,
to uh, give to people, especially the media industry? Uh, you know, anything? Because
absolutely.
most of the readers or viewers of my podcast are from the media advertising industry. Anything would you would any last parting thoughts?
Yeah, so the first is I basically believe that India is an amazing place which has massive growth. I would, I've always believed that the three countries that are going to drive the future are China, India, and America. Okay. Second is, unlike China, India happens to have access to both all the big American companies, but they also tend to be, most of these American companies tend to be run by the Indian guys, right? Like
True.
the Adobes and the Googles and the
Adobe's and the
Microsoft,
Googles.
etc., right? Microsoft, IBM, it just goes in. So the idea really, I think, in the Indian market is to basically start reimagining and increasingly innovate and start taking more risks. Okay, because I think what India has is we, for some reason, do not take as many risks, though we have as much intelligence and as anybody else in the
Mm,
world. We tend to be a little less risk taking. The other is pay attention to your talent because your talent is going to be very, very important. And third is a lot of people who are middle management to senior management. I urge you to spend an hour a day learning, please. Okay. The only reason outside of luck and a lot of people helping me that I managed to reinvent my career over 45 years, right? I'm now 65 and I'm talking to people about AI. I launched one of the first interactive agencies 30 years ago, right? I started when there were typewriters and fax machines and no computers. So the two things I would urge people is please do not tell me you're too old and you want to retire and this world will not happen while you still have a job. Please don't do that because it is the most demeaning thing to yourself because everybody is capable of doing anything. But also, by the way, the world's best talent will never work for you if that's your attitude. They will feel it. right? And the next generation doesn't want to work for people who refuse to change and they're just biding their time till they retire.
Got it. Those are words of wisdom. I think most people should be able to follow those things. And
Yeah.
anyways, Rishad, thanks for taking your time, and it was wonderful
Thank you
talking
very
to you.
much.
And
You bet.
all right, thank you so much. Take care.
Bye bye.